What is up, fam? My name is Sunil. Thank you so much for tuning in to So Real Sports Talk. We have a very special guest once again. Rich Madrid made it to the show. Thank you so much, Rich. I know you got family in town. Appreciate you making some time to talk to us today.
Yeah, man, it's good to be back.
I love it. I love it. We got so many requests from you from the last show. I had to get you on another time while the fire was hot. But
That's excellent.
this and I for all of you guys, please subscribe or please follow Rich Madrid. He just posted a new article that I read, which was pretty awesome. I guess you're getting back into writing now, huh, Rich?
Yeah, it's about that time of year. I got to start cranking it out again because I've kind of took a little too much time off, and it's hard to find the motivation to do it sometimes. But today's as good a day to be motivated as ever with camp starting and everything. So
I love it. I love it. And speaking of camp, I feel like this year we have a lot of things to be excited about because of this rookie class that's coming in. You know, we obviously have a rookie quarterback, but you know that's been talked about quite a bit. What I really want to focus on is the rest of the rookie class. I really feel like this rookie class could be a strong class, one of the best probably under the Kyle Shanahan regime as far as how many players can make an impact and possibly be starters or at least rotation players starting even this season. So let's get into it. Second round draft pick, Aaron Banks. A lot of people are excited about this pick, feeling like he could be a starter from day one. How did you feel about this pick when you first saw it, Rich? And diving into the tape, what did you see that either made you excited or not?
So let me preface this by saying that I didn't really do a lot of draft work on anything outside of the quarterbacks because I knew that was going to be the most important position. And I just didn't have a lot of time. So I didn't really know who a lot of the guys were until they were picked. You know, I might have heard their name, you know, here and there, watching a game here and there last fall, but I didn't really know the direction they were going to go after that, and didn't really know who Aaron Banks was until I threw on his tape. And I have quite a bit of college tape, so pulling up his stuff was easy. As soon as they announced the pick, I went to the Notre Dame film and started watching him, and I really liked what I saw. He is a guy that excelled in a mostly gap scheme running game, you know, power, counter, duo, things like that. But he really moves well in space, and I think that's what the appeal of him was coming into, you know, the 49ers with the zone running game. Now they do run Shanahan does run a fair amount of gap scheme runs. They've kind of been on the uptick the last couple of seasons. So I think the appeal is there for a guy who really just generally moves well.
Now, I know one of the things that people were a little bit surprised when Banks was picked was it's not necessarily the prototypical guy that Shanahan has picked in the past. Obviously, Mike McGlinchey being, you know, the prime aspect. This guy is a lot bigger, comes with a lot of size, known primarily more for the pass game as far as his ability to block in the pass game. And so you feel like he's going to be able to seamlessly transition into the run game, or do you feel like that's going to be a struggle of his?
No, I think he'll be fine. I was watching a little bit of him again last night, and some of the other things I did notice on a second watch of some of his film is that in wide zone scheme, you want the lineman's head to get to the outside shoulder of the blocker, or of the not the blocker, I'm sorry, the defender. And oftentimes he can't quite get there. He's got a great lateral first step, or, you know, he basically in a wide zone. And excuse me if I'm kind of jumping all over the place in this, but basically in a wide zone, the first step you want angled at the guy you're going to block. So he gets a pretty good first step, whether it's lateral or diagonal at the blocker, because, you know, in wide zone, they often have to block the guy to their left or right, usually if there's no one head up. And so he does struggle a bit with getting his head to that outside shoulder of the defender. But where he makes up for it is in his power in driving the defender off. I mean, he can wall him off pretty well. He's a big guy, so he can make up for that. So he might struggle with that in the NFL against, you know, interior defensive linemen that are a little bit bigger than he was playing at Notre Dame. But it's something that's easily cleaned up. You know, they're going to get thousands of reps with that first step and getting that head across. So, I think he'll easily clean that up. But it is something to watch for with him. As
Where do
far as
you?
pass,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, please finish.
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as pass blocking, I don't really see a lot of issues there. I think he's pretty strong, and actually think, as well as he moves in the run game, I think passing game is his main strength.
Right. And where do you kind of project him playing on the line? I think right now people are penciling him in to start at right guard. However, in college he was playing left guard, correct?
Yeah, it's easier to go from guard to guard spot than it is tackle to tackle, I think. So I don't really see him moving Tomlinson out of the way for that spot. So I do think he'll probably slot in at right guard. Who else is going to play there? I mean, I don't think there's a lot of competition there. I guess the other option
is Brunskill. Is a lot. Some people are saying maybe he'd slide in there, but
nah, I don't think he'll. I don't think Brunskill's going to beat him out. I mean, I think they'll compete for the spot and maybe alternate, reps or series or quarters or whatever. But I think ultimately it's going to be Aaron Banks.
Now, last season, that right side of the offensive line was a bit of a weakness. It seems like McGlinchey is more focused this offseason. He seems to have gained some weight, which is a good sign. How do you project that right side of the line looking if Aaron Banks does, slot in there? What would be some of their strengths? What would you see some things that maybe needed to be worked on?
Well, for the right side of the offensive line, I think the main issue was the interior. So basically the center and the right guard. I didn't think for as many as bad snaps as McGlinchey had, I don't think he was the primary issue there. I think it was the center, and I think actually the right guard spot gave up more pressures collectively than McGlinchey or Williams did from the tackle spots. So the interior was definitely a weakness last season. As far as Banks, how he kind of fits in there, I mean, he's going to have a veteran with McGlinchey next to him, and an All-Pro center with Alex Mack calling the shots in that line. So I think he's going to fit right in with those two guys, and they're going to be there to pick him up. And I think he's going to, be there to kind of piggyback off of what Mack and McGlinchey do in the run game and the passing game. And he's got two great mentors there right away. So I don't think there's going to be any issue.
And I think something that is good, a good thing for the 49ers, it seems like offensive linemen tend to transition pretty well if they're good, right? So There are people that can just pick up right where they left off in college. And Notre Dame has been one of the better schools of producing offensive linemen. So all of those things are good signs for the 49ers. Do you assume that do you think that there's any way that he can contend with Tomlinson and maybe on that left side, or do you think there's no way Tomlinson gets beat out and switches over to the right?
I don't think there's any way Tomlinson gets beat out. I think he had a really, really solid year last year. Yeah,
and the only reason why I think that, or why I'm asking that, is because I think he's in the last year of his contract, or might be able to be a free agent. So I wonder if maybe they are looking to re-sign Tomlinson, or if they feel like maybe Banks can move into right guard and they could kind of let Tomlinson walk, because he probably is gonna probably get some pretty big money for the way he's performed the last few seasons with the 49ers.
I think so too, and I think he's replaceable. I don't know if they want to spend top money for a guard or close to top money for a guard. I think they'd rather spend that on a tackle, which they did. And then they're picking up McGlinchey's fifth year. I think that'd just be a lot of money to tie up in that spot. So I don't know. I mean, it is important, but I think in Shanahan's offense, the tackles and the centers are vastly more important than any other position. So outside of the quarterback, but I don't see them bringing him back necessarily. If they do, great. That'd be great, because he's a guy who's already familiar with the system and things like that. But I think they'll probably look elsewhere, either draft or free agency, for something a little more value.
And if we're slotting in everybody where we think they're going to be, right? So left tackle, left guard, center, Banks at right guard, and McGlinchey at right tackle. How do you see this overall offensive line being compared to last season, and how would you compare it to 2019?
I think they're much better than last season. I don't know that they're probably on the level of 2019. You just had more veterans in 2019. You know, you had Staley, whose replacement you don't often find, but Trent Williams did just fine. Trent Williams is probably a much better tackle at this point. But not, no disrespect to Staley or anything. I love Joe Staley. So I think it's a wash there. I think left guard's the same. Center is definitely an upgrade. Losing Richburg and then Garland was a big issue. You have guys that after Garland it was just kind of a revolving door at center, and that's not ideal. You had Garasu playing there. I think Brunskill took some snaps there.
Right.
I don't know if I even want to say maybe Justin School did, but I don't remember. I think there were 4 or 5 guys that ended up playing center in the last season. And after Garland, there was a big drop off. Right guard 2019 was Mike Person. He was really good. So that was, kind of a downgrade last year when that was kind of a revolving door spot too, between McKivitz and Brunskill and whoever else played there. And then obviously right tackle's been the same for 4 years or 3 years at least, going into the 4th year. So, McGlinchey's kind of always been who he is. Hopefully he gets better this season, but a lot of issues last season kind of, I think, magnified his performance because there wasn't really a lot to critique, and people don't really remember how he played in his rookie year. And in 2019, he kind of played the same way to me. So everything else, kind of hid his issues over the last 3 seasons, except for last year. So.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'm looking for as far as upside, in the 2019 season, it seemed like the offensive line, we had stability at each position, and the fact that we knew who was going to play at each position. There was no real competition. And I feel like this season is kind of going back to that, where every position's kind of defined with the player that is going to be there. And I think that's a good sign going into training camp. They could work more on cohesion versus working on who's going to play, and I think that's going to overall transition into, better play coming into the regular season. So I like that about what we got going on. So let's talk a little bit about who they might be blocking for. So Trey Sermon was a player that the 49ers moved up to draft in the third round. Have you looked at much tape of Trey Sermon? And if you have, what do you see in him? And how do you think he's going to fit into Kyle Shanahan's running game?
He's an aggressive zone runner. He loves the physicality of the game. And Ohio State runs their fair amount of outside and inside zone. I think they do a pretty good mix. It's kind of like the hybrid version of Urban Meyer's and Chip Kelly's offense, because Ryan Day coached for both of them. So they both Chip Kelly really loved the outside zone, and Urban Meyer's more of an inside zone guy. So with Trey Sermon, you get a little bit of both. Early on, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Carlos Hyde in that he's a very physical runner. But I think he's a much better outside runner than Hyde was. Hyde was primarily an inside zone guy coming out of OSU. So I think he has a leg up in that regard. And he's a guy who is a very good pass catching back. Last season, watching some of the running backs catch passes out of the backfield, I think Shanahan really puts a premium on some of that stuff. And they, outside of a few big plays, you kind of get bobbled passes here and there, maybe some drops in there with Mostert and Wilson. And Shanahan's a guy who really likes to use the running backs in the passing game, and you just haven't seen that a lot. Obviously, injuries to the position have dictated where they go with this. So, McKinnon being hurt, Hasty got hurt last year, Mostert and Wilson all got hurt, Coleman. And those, McKinnon and Coleman would have been the primary pass catching guys because that's how they've been utilized throughout their career. And that's especially how Shanahan used Coleman. And it just didn't pan out. And I think going the route what they did with Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell signals a big shift in the running back room, that maybe Mostert and Wilson aren't going to be around much longer.
Yeah. And I kind of looked at it like trying to go back to what happened in 2019. So 2019, obviously the running game was very elite, ranked 2 in the league. And they had that three-headed monster with Tevin Coleman, Breida, and Mostert. And, Breida and Mostert obviously were the speedsters that would come in and, they were averaging ridiculous yards per carry the whole season. But Tevin Coleman was the guy who took most of the bulk of the hits, right? He was mostly the guy that was in for pass protection, and he was the guy that was mainly running through the tackles versus the sweeps that Breida and Mostert would go on. So I think they missed that last season because Mostert ended up taking a bulk of the carries, and he just isn't built big enough, which is why he was injured. So I really see maybe Coleman and a guy like Gallman coming in, taking a bulk of the beating to open up those lanes for Mostert to just do his home run hitting style and average, 4 or 5 yards a carry, which he could definitely do behind this offensive line, and especially if Kittle's healthy as well. Do you think that Trey Sermon could fit into that Coleman role? Do you think he's built to be able to take over that type of position?
Oh, absolutely. He didn't have I don't think he had a 200 plus carry season at Ohio State, so I don't think there's any concerns about durability or how much mileage he has on his legs. I think he's going to last, probably at least 5 or 6 years. Most running backs don't last more than 2-3 years, maybe 4 at the most, a rookie contract, and that's kind of the last you see of them unless you've got like a Dalvin Cook or a Kamara or a Nick Chubb or anything. And I think maybe I don't know if Sermon can get to that level, but in Shanahan's scheme, they don't need to.
Yeah.
They're going to be, if they're running out there with Mostert, Wilson, Mitchell, and Sermon, they don't need to rely on one guy. And I don't think Sermon's going to be an every down kind of guy. I think he's going to be primarily an early down back. That's what he was at OSU. I think that'll stay the same. So they'll definitely be running back by committee again. But I think, in 2022, it's going to be the Trey Sermon show for sure. I think this year is just going to be to kind of get him ready and used to the style of offense that he's going to be playing in.
Do you see him as somebody who could be a 3-down back? And mainly I'm thinking, like, can he read in pass protection, be able to pick up the loose blitzer or whatever? Have you seen that type of vision with him? Because that was something Coleman was actually really good at, and something that I think, we're lacking. I don't know if Mostert could play that type of role. Not too sure about Gallman, what his ability is there. But do you see that in Sermon being a 3-down back?
Absolutely. He had, I'm looking at some of my numbers here, notes that I have. He had 240 plus snaps in the passing game. And he gave up, I think, 9 pressures and 1 sack. So, I'd say that's pretty good. He's a pretty good pass blocking back, and that's what Coleman was. I don't really think that's Mostert's strength. So I think that's where Trey Sermon can come in and eventually be a 3-down back, but I don't think he'll be that right away.
And one thing that I really like about Sermon, he seems like he has that mentality that he doesn't mind to put a team on his back. He had some pretty amazing games with Ohio State, even though they had so much talent there. It seemed like he was their consistent person that was always performing. So, I feel like that attitude and that mentality can really transition well into the 49ers backfield, because I don't know if we have that mentality right now. I think Mostert wants to be that kind of guy, but physically, I don't know if he's capable of. It seems like that would be a big upgrade, and he seems more of like a Kyle Shanahan type guy to me than like a Mostert, right? He seems more of that cut from the cloth of being able to do everything that Shanahan looks for from running back.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind, though, too, is running backs in a Shanahan scheme don't often last long. I mean,
True.
They typically fall off a huge cliff. I mean, Alfred Morris was turning in 1,400 plus yard seasons his rookie contract, and then he fell off a cliff after that. And then it's true of all running backs, but particularly in Shanahan's offense, after a couple of years in it seems to have taken a toll. Even they got Devonta Freeman in his prime, and it kind of took a toll on him. He hasn't been the same since. And then you look at other backs around the league. It's going to be interesting to see how Dalvin Cook does this year, because they run the same offense. Todd Gurley, kind of hit a wall. And even in his worst year, he still had 800 or 900 yards, but he looked noticeably different. I can't, some of the other offenses, I don't know. I don't remember. The Rams just lost another running back, last week or whatever.
Right.
But that was completely, not game related or anything. But you have to find a number of running backs that you can have at your disposal to run this offense, because it does take a toll on them constantly. Getting in space and hitting guys all the time like Mostert does. I mean, these guys run incredibly hard. So it just seems like every back in Shanahan's offense at some point falls off a cliff. So I think that's why we can see them continually taking guys year after year in the draft or undrafted or whatever. You just can't have enough of them.
Yeah, and I was excited that they actually took somebody in the top 3 rounds, because there seems to be a big distinction between talent that's taken in the top 3 rounds versus talent that's taken below that, as far as productivity in the league right off the bat. So I wrote an article for that, like in all 49ers before, that those top 3 top 3 rounds running backs tend to do so much better than guys that are below that. So it's great that they actually did that, because I think you're right. If we didn't draft a guy like Trey Sermon, we're looking at this running back room thinking, wow, this is kind of not a good, pretty thin, and could be another struggle season, but that's great. Well, I'm just going in order right now, so let's go another 3rd round pick, Ambry Thomas. This is a guy I'm really high on. I was really excited that they were able to grab him. He obviously opted out last season, so he didn't get a lot of praise going into this draft because he just didn't play. But he's a 3-year starter for Michigan, has played against some guys that we've seen in the NFL do really well, and had some pretty good games against them. So what did you see in Ambry Thomas when you're looking at the film, and how do you feel about this pick overall?
I had been wondering what happened to him last season, and I guess he didn't play because he opted out for COVID or whatever. But I do watch a lot of Michigan football during the season because I have a vested rooting interest in Jim Harbaugh. But I thought he played really well. He's a very physical guy for being, on the smaller side for a corner. I think he's only 5'11", 6 foot maybe. I think he's on a good day listed at 6 foot. But I think he only fell to the 3rd round just because he didn't have that final year, no reps under his belt for then. And maybe that shouldn't have mattered, but I think there's definitely enough there for him to be a higher 2nd round pick.
Now, what did you see in his game that gave you that? Because even though he might not have the intangibles as far as height, it doesn't seem like it affects his play, because he seems like a very aggressive corner.
He is. So he comes out of Don Brown's scheme. And Don Brown, if you follow Michigan football, is primarily a cover 1 man coverage guy. And some people will say that's the best coverage in football. And I think it signals kind of where the 49ers want to go with their defense. I think they're going to play a little more man coverage. I think they're going to play a little more single high stuff in that regard. They'll probably keep a lot of the same coverage shells they have in the past, but I think they want to get more physical with guys at the line of scrimmage and things like that. They know they can do. You've already got a guy like Fred Warner who can cover basically anybody in the league. And then you've got, whoever ends up outside. Verrett's a good cover guy, very good cover guy last season. And then Mosley, who's probably going to end up being that 2nd corner. Ambry Thomas is a guy you look to come in and, probably get reps initially right away in the nickel. Probably, I think he fits really well with the nickel position. And who knows what's going to happen with K'Waun Williams? I'm really bad with contracts and things like that. Is he even still?
He is. He signed a 1-year deal this season, so it's a play contract.
So Ambry Thomas coming in, I think, kind of signals where they're going to go with the nickel spot, unless Williams just completely blows them away again. I mean, Williams is a very good nickel corner. He's probably one of the best in the league. But I don't know if they want to pay, another, top contract to a guy when they have to pay Bosa, probably, depending on how he does. And maybe, look at keeping Verrett around if he stays healthy and has a good season. I'd much rather pay Verrett than I think a nickel. And then so you get Ambry Thomas in there to play nickel, and I think you're solid.
Do you think Ambry can contend for that number 2 cornerback? Because the way that I saw him play on film, especially against Notre Dame, where he was playing the receiver that's with Pittsburgh right now, it's slipping my brain right now, but he it seems like when he played tough competition, he seemed to elevate his game through that. I didn't see him get burned too many times. Seems like he's really disciplined with his hips and his eyes. I'm looking at a guy like Mosley, who obviously is, one of the better corners that we've had the last few seasons, but he is an undrafted, cornerback for a reason. Ambry Thomas, like you said, could have been a 2nd-round pick if he played. Obviously, is a 3rd-round pick for the 49ers. He has some intangibles that Mosley probably doesn't have. Could you see a backfield or a secondary with Verrett and Mosley and Ambry Thomas being on opposite ends of that? And how do you think that would stack up against, the NFC West receivers?
I think that would be just fine. I mean, we watched Mosley and Witherspoon go toe to toe with DK Metcalf, in a couple of those games in 2019 and 2020. I think he kind of got the better of them in the first game they played last season, and then in week 17 when they played Seattle again. Mosley I think it was Witherspoon actually, but I think pretty much shut him down the whole game. They couldn't get anything to Metcalf in that game. And that's because they were aggressive and physical with him. And I think that's what they want to do with their corners going forward. Verrett is a guy who's going to get up there and get physical, even though he's a shorter stature corner, a lot lighter than some of the other guys that you see playing the position. And then same with Ambry Thomas. Yeah, I do think he'll challenge for that 2nd cornerback spot. I don't know if he'll come away with it. If he comes away with it, even better. I mean, he is a guy that you want up there getting aggressive and physical and not letting these guys get off the line of scrimmage. You can disrupt the timing of passing plays and things like that when you have a guy like that. So it's all going to depend on how, I guess, Mosley does. I don't really know if there's much of a competition there. I kind of think it's Mosley's to start, but how corners in this system play. I mean, the first sign of trouble, they're looking for another guy to put in there.
Right.
And so Ambry Thomas would probably be that guy.
And one thing that I really like about Ambry Thomas is in his 3 seasons that he started with Michigan, he was never injured. He actually played every single game, which is a big upgrade as far as what usually the 49ers go after. They go after kind of those chance picks that have had injury histories. This guy is somebody who's played a lot and stayed healthy. So he knows that skill of staying healthy and still playing aggressive, which is, something that the 49ers can use. I didn't actually put it in the questions, but they did pick up another corner in the 5th round, Lenoir. What did you see in him? Do you think he makes the team? Do you think he's somebody that could make an impact in his rookie season, or is he somebody that might be stashed away for further down the line?
I think he'll make it. I think he's another physical guy like that. I don't think he's as physical as Thomas, but I definitely think he'll make it because they don't have a lot of depth there. And even if Thomas beats out for the 2nd corner spot, you still have Lenoir there who can probably slot in at nickel too. And maybe initially, but as a backup. But I don't think they're going to want to roll with too few corners this year. So I definitely think he's going to be in the mix.
Did you see anything about him that you liked? Any flashes of something that could really make a benefit to the team this season?
Not too much in the stuff that I watched. I just think he's a solid depth addition. And nothing more really. I mean, he had the one good rep that got them in trouble with the league,
right?
In rookie minicamp, and he can be another physical guy. And I think that's what like I said, that it keeps coming back to this. They keep looking for these guys in the secondary now that are going to be physical. That's just, the defensive coordinator's nature. His name escapes me right now. God, I'm so bad with that stuff.
DeMeco Ryans.
Ryans. He's a more physical coach. I think he wants to be physical, and that's where this roster is headed on the back end. So I don't know if that he can be a full-time starter, but I definitely think he's a solid depth addition.
And I think it's just where the NFC West has gone. You know, NFC West has some of the best receivers in any division. You know what I mean? With you're going against two wide receiver ones pretty much against every team, right? With you know the Seahawks have Metcalf and Lockett, which both are rough nights out for a cornerback. You know, the Cardinals got D Hop, and now they got AJ Green there, who obviously is coming off of injuries, but still, you know, somebody that has shown could be a very elite receiver. And then with the Rams, you got Kupp and Woods, who are both, you know, very solid receivers as well. So you can't just you can't be a corner that can hide anymore, because no matter where you are, you're going to be going up against a really good talent at receiver that can expose you if you're not disciplined with the way that you play.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's move on. Next, I got Jalen Moore. So the 49ers definitely took a big look at their offensive line and said we need to add some size to it. Jalen Moore is another big dude that they drafted, I believe, 5th round. What did you see in Jalen Moore? And it's kind of tough to project where he would play on the line. Obviously, he doesn't seem like he'd be a starter right off the jump. But
No.
What did you see? What did you see in him? And where do you think he would slot in the rotation?
I think he could end up being the swing tackle, or he's either going to end up as a swing tackle or probably as a backup guard right away for his rookie contract. If you know, assuming he makes the roster, he is a guy who played in a mostly wide zone scheme, and I use these terms interchangeably, wide zone and outside zone, just because that's how people know them. But there's some differences in those two. Like outside zone is more of a more to the sideline, and wide zone is a little more kind of between mid zone and things like that. I don't want to get bogged down in too many of those details, so I'll just use them interchangeably. But he comes from a system like that at Western Michigan. He can play some gap scheme stuff like power and counter and things like that, but he's a guy who's going to end up being just probably a depth piece in it, you know, for a while, maybe nothing more. He does have, you know, initially he has a good step, can get off and get to the defender right away. But sometimes during plays, it looks like his motor just kind of, I don't know, fades away or dies is the right word. But, and it's not to say that he takes plays off. It's just, I don't know if the conditioning or the technique is there to become a long-term starter, you know, full-time or whatever. But I do think he's going to add some quality depth to the swing tackle or guard position.
Do you see him making the rotation this season, or is he practice squad guy that they bring up in case of injuries?
I'm teetering the line between practice squad and very bottom roster. You know, at least initially, I think he's gonna take some work to develop a little bit. So I don't know if he'll make the roster right away, and if he does, it'll be, you know, one of the last few spots.
Got you. Cool. And then the last pick that, you know, I'd like us to talk about. You kind of mentioned him earlier when you were talking about Trey Sermon, but Elijah Mitchell, you know, going 6th round, 49ers last pick was pretty interesting, right? A lot of people thought they were going to take a receiver or, you know, a lineman or a D lineman, but they ended up going running back again. What did you see in Elijah Mitchell, and where do you see him kind of fit in this, you know, crowded 49er backfield right now?
He is a guy that is very athletic. He just, you know, it doesn't matter where running backs go in the draft. He could end up being a really good player for them, at least in year 2. And then depending on year 1, how injuries and things like that shake out. But primarily, again, another zone-based running back, outside zone-based running back. Doesn't really have the pass-catching ability that Sermon does, or that you kind of want. But he's also a guy who can be a very effective early down back. And kind of give the other guys a break. So he does have a lot of value for Shanahan. I don't think the rest of the league would value somebody like that as much. But, you know, taking 2 running backs in the same draft, 2 rounds apart, is kind of telling and where they want this to go.
Yeah, I mean, they took 2 linemen, 2 running backs. you could see what they're focused on this offseason, and what they really felt like was one of their biggest weaknesses is definitely that running game. So they really bolstered that up. Looking back, and now that you've had some time to digest the rookie class and the picks that they made, how did you overall feel about what the 49ers did with this rookie class?
I liked it. I didn't have any issues with any of it. I think people were kind of, well, why'd they take 2 running backs and things like that? But I mean, who cares? When you watch kind of the decline of Mostert and Wilson the last season or so, they needed to find something, and whether it was in the draft or undrafted, they had to do something. They couldn't roll into this season again with basically 3 guys who've been injured, and then 2 that aren't coming back, Coleman and McKinnon. So they really needed to do something at that position, and I think this was the year to do it. And I think they got, outside Sermon's, he's more than a quality back. I think he's going to be really good. And he has a chance to be special in this offense. And then, Mitchell's another quality back. So they're going to roll into this season with at least those 4, and then whatever they do with Hasty. So you can't be, if you like the running game, you can't be too upset with how that running back room is going to look, because they have all 5 guys that can play.
And if you're making a Rich Madrid guess or prediction, who do you think makes the biggest impact out of this rookie class outside of Trey Lance? Who do you think makes the biggest impact this upcoming year?
I think it's going to be Aaron Banks. I think he's going to slot in and start right away. And offensive line is damn near the most important thing that a team can have, and good players at the positions. I mean, you've got guys who are elite run blockers. McGlinchey's an elite run blocker. Trent Williams is an elite pass blocker and run blocker. Tomlinson is a very, very solid player. Alex Mack is another, all pro, who's playing in his late 30s, but offensive linemen in their late 30s, don't typically lose a step. I mean, I think Andrew Whitworth for the Rams had an injury recently, but he's been playing. He's going to play till he's 40, it seems like. So these guys, playing that position doesn't quite take the toll that it used to on them. And you're finding offensive linemen play longer and longer. Even Staley, into his late 30s. I think Staley's my age or maybe a year younger. So I think those guys will be just fine. I think they're going to be a really, really elite unit this year. And I think Banks adds to that with what he can do. And I think you won't see it obviously in the stat sheet, but you should see it in things like, hopefully, like pressures come down and sacks come down and things like that.
And then if you were to predict 3 years from now, who do you think is the most impactful rookie from this class? Trey
Lance.
Easy pick, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Easily. I mean, he'd probably be the starter by the end of the season, and we'll see. He's going to have the easiest time of any of the rookie quarterbacks with Shanahan.
Fingers crossed, man. Fingers crossed. But thanks, Rich. I know you got a lot going on over there. I appreciate you taking the time to come on today. Please tell the people that are watching how they could get read some of your articles, where they could find what you're doing next, and so on and so forth.
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at RichJMadrid. I'm always tweeting there. And then find me at NinersNation.com. I just posted a Trey Lance piece the other day, actually yesterday. It's up on my Twitter page somewhere. And I believe it's still probably on the front page of Niners Nation. It was kind of a slow posting day over there yesterday. And then on footballzebras.com. As the season gets ramped up again, we'll be churning out more stuff on the rules and things like that. And I've got still trying to finish up this piece I interviewed Mike Person on for Football Zebras, and I'll be cross-posting it at Niners Nation about a rules change that the league had for this year's low blocking rule. That'll be posted hopefully by the end of this week. I've got a couple edits I need to do on it before I get it posted. And then it'll be up, and then I'll be back in the swing of things, looking at talking to Mike Person again for some running game stuff, working on a piece like that in August, and maybe see what comes out of training camp or the preseason that I can write about, and then right back into it in September. So all at Niners Nation.
Beautiful. And I'm definitely going to be picking Rich Madrid's brain. We'll have him back on the show in the future. But thank you once again, Rich. Appreciate you taking the time. And everybody, tune in. A few minutes, we're going to have Jack Hammer on the show. Keep it so real. Have a nice day, guys.
Tell Jack I said what's up.
I will.